Heather.
Thank you for joining us. Can you introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, of course, I'd be happy to. So Heather Barton-Jones. I run the Strategic Transformation Office for the international business, which is everything outside of the Americas and Japan. I have a team of what we call transformation directors, effectively just really smart people from different backgrounds in the industry, ex-customers, value consultants, management consultants, really to focus on how do we solve our customers' hardest problems. We find the solutions that ultimately transform our customer businesses and partner with the solution engineers and product on the technical side.
Okay, and when you say transform the business transformation, What do you mean by that?
So ultimately for me, it's really about what drives outcomes for our customers. So always on the services side, our software is only as good as the outcome that it drives for the customer. Like the features and functions are fantastic, the innovations that are coming are next level. But for me, the success is the implementation and the impact it drives for the customer. We're working with a particular insurer in the UK at the moment, and one of their underwriters isn't able to quote for as much work as they possibly can back to the customer. It's worth £40 million in gross written premiums. So the technology stack they use is great, but for the customer, it's about what's written in the annual report and how does it really help them either drive more money or drive more outcomes.
And you probably usually work with C-level, right? So what's important in those conversations?
I think it's CXOs, but it's also any business owners, anyone that's accountable for the business outcome. I think particularly in large organizations, we can still drive the same impact at a business unit level. So it's ultimately about finding the person that's accountable for the problem that they want to solve. So it's about the person who ultimately is the one that feels the pain if something doesn't get done. In lots of the cases, it's honestly operating with humility. These are people, and anyone can read an annual report or read a report that demonstrates what people are doing and how they're being successful. But it's really then trying to get to the heart of what it is that they're trying to solve. And I think particularly at the moment in the concept of how disruptive technology is, we're really looking at how we can help customers regain their competitive advantage in the market, because it's almost that moment of disrupt or be disrupted. And we're seeing lots of CXOs ultimately wanting to build partnerships with vendors to really do the test of what's the art of the possible in the truest sense of how it helps us transform the industry, the market, the nature of insurance, the nature of citizen services in this new age.
Heather, I like the point how you talked about the C-level and how you talked about competitive differentiation of the market, because those who are not adopting AI are basically staying behind everyone else. And what about bottom-up approach? Maybe some CXOs, maybe some leadership teams are not that interested in implementing AI yet, even though they may be thinking about that. And when it comes to bottom-up, how do you have those conversations, how to show value to the C-level if they are still hesitating?
Yeah, there's two lenses, I think, when you look at it. And in lots of cases, and there's actually C-levels that are already doing this today and they don't know about it. So they've got massive COEs delivering impact, but they're measuring the wrong things. So if you look at lots of our heritage customers that have been with us since sort of 2018, 2019, at that time, we were measuring capacity release, we were measuring FTEs. And if you actually look at the impact that's delivering, at the time, it was appropriate. But we've actually had conversations with CXOs, and we've had a few in retail manufacturing, other customers, where we go in and reevaluate the impact with the team on the ground to re-quantify the benefit. So rather than it being 7 million euros in FTE, it's actually had 120 million impact in revenue. That story, in lots of cases, is the one that's opening the doors to, whether it's the CIO, quite often it's the COO. So lots of times the bottom-up approach already exists. It's about how do you tell the story and help clients tell that story back into their own business in a really powerful way. And in other cases, we've got massive bottom-up programs that have been running for years and years and years that are delivering huge impact, where they've already got the engine, it's already working, and a CXO or one of the leaders, particularly in the public sector, we've seen this, have gone, we need to be doing more with AI. And we've kind of gone, oh no, but we're already here and we're already delivering impact. And they've been so impressed by what they've seen that they have a foundation to build on. And it's not the technology or what's being deployed, it's the skills and the knowledge of the operating model in the business. The technology is just an extra layer and a little tweak, but having that engine of being able to ingest new use cases means that the path to ROI is much, much shorter. So where bottom up has always previously been perceived as a bit of a challenge and a slower time to value, so many customers are already on this journey. It's actually about how do you transform and plug into that to make it go further.
That's a very good point. And in terms of how you talk about people transformation, people first transformation, right? For the initiatives coming from the top, there is a fear that AI is going to replace people, that it's going to take their jobs. How do you approach that, and how do you help the C-level communicate that value, not creating a fear that people are going to lose their jobs?
I think the fascinating thing is it depends what the driver is, because in lots of cases, there are CXOs that want to do that. They need to, consolidate and transform the organization. And that's a very hard kind of FTE rip out way of doing it. But 9 times out of 10, it's about taking out a certain type of person and they end up replacing them later. So quite often we're bringing in CHROs or chief people officers earlier in these conversations, because the moment now is so big that we're actually ultimately redesigning how work is done. We need different talent in the organization. And if there are people that want to be part of that, there's an opportunity to reinvest talent. Because when you look at it in the context of a process, you might not need that many people. But if you zoom out to the bigger picture of an organization, there is never enough people doing something.
Yeah.
So it's all about talent redeployment and reskilling. And I think the competitive advantage is where we look at who's building the builders of tomorrow. Because quite often you see people trying to convert the skeptics in an organization that don't believe, and spending all their energy and time there trying to convince people that, no, we still need entry level and we still need this and we still need these jobs, which we do. It's going to evolve. But if you invested in turning entry level talent into builders that can leverage coding agents to deploy faster, your time to value is far, far quicker, and the makeup of your workforce will probably largely be the same in terms of cost base and levels, but the impact and output and how you measure people will be different. So that entry-level jobs are disappearing, and it's actually been all over the UK press this week, which is a really interesting kind of problem statement. They're not disappearing, they're just changing.
The bar is different, a different
Totally.
paradigm. Hazard, I also wanted to ask you about POCs. Sometimes we can talk to customers and we hear that they want to do something, we do the pilot and it gets stuck, it doesn't go to production. What do you do in those cases? How do you manage that expectation from the beginning?
Yeah, I think it's about how you start, because quite often people go for low risk, something really discreet and in the corner. And the problem with that is, even if it goes well, it's not big enough or sexy enough to get the attention to drive impact to unlock the risk. Because quite often the decisions of why it stalls is, does it deliver the return on investment? Is it worth the infrastructure cost? Because if you pick something to experiment, and if you're piloting the technology capability to see if it can work in an environment, that's fine if you're picking something small. But if you're trying to get sign-off from the business to invest in something that delivers impact, you pick a small process, you're going to get a small return. And you're not going to find that the outcome is worth the risk because you can't make a balanced judgment. So what we tend to recommend to overcome that is picking the right process to pilot against, but also picking the right KPIs to measure what success looks like for the pilot from the very start. It's ultimately about really understanding the KPIs of what success looks like, picking the right process from the outset, and having the sponsorship to go deep. And I think the big part about any pilot and POC is the level of discovery on the business side of it that needs to be done, because the technology side is always, it's quite discrete, it's quite objective, but the subjectivity around the decisions of how things drive impact is really ultimately about discovering what the business status looks like today and what ultimately you want it to be. A huge part of that discovery process builds advocacy through the process as well. That's how you find the builders, that's how you find the champions that you take to carry it through. And that's really important, even if you have a live pilot or POC that seems to be stalling, doing almost a reverse discovery on the impact it could have to the business is a good way to restart that process if investment's already gone in that you don't want to lose.
And I would also add to that, that at the entry point, when we just start talking about automation, it's very important to understand if that use case is a good candidate for automation, meaning that maybe it just needs to be optimized. Maybe some basic business optimization tools would work. If you want sparkling, sexy technologies, that's also fine. We can do that. But sometimes you can go kind of with something simpler and then scale, and then you would see more value because the return on the investment would be different, of course.
It's about picking the right weapon for the job. Ultimately now, I think the illusion is that an LLM can do anything, which it can. Doesn't mean that it should. And it doesn't mean that it's the right thing, to your point, like cost effective or also from an auditability perspective. Yeah. You can experiment and build anything, but it's ultimately about what's the outcome you want to achieve and the guardrails that you're operating within to make sure that happens. It's a really good point.
Cool, thank you for sharing that. And I think my last question for you would be about your favorite stories where you could see some really exciting ROI coming and the customers really seeing a big value that maybe even they didn't expect to get from the information.
And I think loads of these are always where you least expect it. My passion is the public sector, because I think ROI in the public sector means a different thing to all of us. Every single one of us is a citizen and will rely on these services.
It's automation for good stories.
Oh, totally. And I think it's all about understanding the impact it has to the end person. So my favourite story ever is with one of our customers in the UK. There was a situation in which loans are given to really vulnerable people. and when they need it the most. So the time someone asks for this loan, they are at the point of almost destitution, like it's desperate measures. And the process between asking for a loan that they might need a washing machine to wash their newborn's clothes that they can't afford, or anything along those lines, the time between asking for it and getting it is 6 weeks. And through that process, there were no updates to the citizen and anything they got. From a very, very quick process that we were able to engage in, we turned that to 5 days.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't have to be the most sophisticated solution to deliver that impact. Sometimes it's about the right weapon for the job. And it's a similar thing with another public sector client in the UK is about fraud identification. 9 times out of 10, if you look in the UK itself, fraud is the largest crime. It's 50% of all crime in the UK. It's huge. And so much of that is done through the public sector system for people that are trying to access services they're not entitled to, which takes away from the previous example I just used. And an example of what would have taken a services organisation the best part of 2,000 FTEs to go through a data backlog and find the malicious behaviour, they built an automation very, very quickly and managed to clear that backlog in 3 days. So it took what could have been a between $2 and $5 million programme, took it down to literally tens of thousands to limit what was hundreds of millions in fraud. It's all there if you're bold enough to try and look for the outcome.
That's really interesting. Sometimes the public sector can be challenging, maybe not even sometimes, because it's a very strictly regulated space, right? So hearing stories like that in public sector are especially inspiring.
Definitely. And it's the same with all regulated industry. That's usually where the pain is felt most acutely and where the benefit is the largest because of the complexity and the governance that they operate in. So for the most part, that's where we spend a lot of our time is trying to transform regulated industry.
Thank you so much, Heather. It was nice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
for having me.
Thanks.